welcome back to Dr. Gina Prime Time. Now, every election these days is the biggest election, at least that's what we're told. The leadership of our country can either steer us away from the brink or take us right over that edge. In 2016, we witnessed a miracle with the Trump win on Election Day. But now it seems we are holding on in some ways for dear life until the next presidential election. And in 2024, there will be an election which seems in some ways like an eternity from now, but I promise you it will sneak up on us before we know it. And that's why there's always one place you can turn above all else, and that is to our faith and our God. Joining me now, she was President Trump's spiritual advisor, Pastor Paula White. Pastor, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be with you, Gina, and with everyone. Excited about this time together.
Well, I'm excited to have you. We served on the Women for Trump board together, and I didn't get a ton of time with you, but when we were together, we were working hard, and so this is a great excitement for me as well. When President Trump was in the White House, Pastor, you worked closely with him on measures to protect and advance religious freedom. It really became sort of a cornerstone of his presidency, probably in a lot of ways based on your counsel. Is religious freedom, by your estimation, under threat now from this administration? And if so, how are you advising Christians to proceed?
Absolutely, Gina. It has just expedited like we've not seen before. We saw America's constitutional religious freedoms to assemble and worship absolutely threatened during the pandemic. For the first time in U.S. history, houses of worship were shut down. Think about what we went through. They set a very dangerous precedent against the First Amendment. Recently, of course, California churches actually had to band together to sue their government to open their doors and freely worship again. Fortunately, they just won that case last month. But as we look at what's going on under the Biden administration, it's extremely dangerous and quite opposite of what we did under President Trump. While running President Biden, then candidate Biden, of course, said that Biden said hate has been given a safe harbor in religious organizations. When we look at that statement, think about it before he even became president. He has now condemned faith-based charities like homeless shelters, adoption agencies as discriminatory. If they don't endorse same-sex marriage, transgender identities, abortion rights, on and on. This is a direct assault not only on Christians, but also Jewish faith, Muslim faith, and so many faiths that we strive to work for the freedom of all people of faith under President Trump's administration. It's also a direct assault on the First Amendment of our Constitution, and it's happening so quickly. Just last week, the Biden administration announced a new Health and Human Services rule that requires federally funded hospitals and insurers to provide gender-related procedures. Think about what we're saying here. It's so far from what we worked on, and that they would not violate a doctor's conscience or a hospital's mission. Essentially, here's what the threat is: to either support transgender goals or to be put out of business. And this is a huge discrimination against religious freedom and religious rights. There's more coming. A lot more that came from this administration, the Biden administration, over the next 3.5 years. And as believers, we have got to pray. We've got to take action. We've got to move and do as much pushback as possible. What's especially stunning, as we've seen recently, is that Biden proudly proclaims his Catholic upbringing, but even the Catholic Church is now beginning to push back on Biden and his policies because they're totally out of alignment with our faith.
Yeah, when you're going to let a newborn baby die on a table, I just don't know how you call yourself any semblance of Christian. Not for me to judge, but I just don't see it. Speaking of President Trump, I'm sorry, go ahead. You can comment on that, sure.
I was going to say, we were so strong with life, and it's such it is not even, it's such a far swing because it's pathetic. God's word is very strong about life, and God has a lot to say about that all through from Genesis to Revelation. And I think if we say what God says, then we just stand in a good and a right position.
Yeah, it's shocking to me how many of the things you just told us, Pastor White, that I haven't even heard in the media yet. And there were good things that President Trump did that I never heard in the media. For example, he wrote a bill about babies with Down syndrome, not selectively aborting them. And I never even knew about that. I mean, I found out about it on my own, but you didn't hear that in the news. I happen to have an adopted son who was slated for abortion who has Down syndrome. So this was very personal to me. This wasn't something, there's not a large Down syndrome population anymore because most of them are aborted. But these are the kinds of things that probably with you, helping and advising from your heart and from your faith, that he went and did quietly sometimes, unrecognized, and that spoke to me about maybe not even who he was when he was elected, but who he became while he was president. Can you speak to that?
You know, Gina, so true. So I've had the privilege and honor of knowing President Trump for 21 years now and having a long relationship. And the media has always mischaracterized, misaligned, been absolutely brutal to him, to his family. Not only did they not tout the policy, but never talked about the character and the integrity of the man. These policies became etched in stone during his administration, which really was a reflection of his values and the values of conservatives that he knew were the base of the conservative, what you would call movement, or what we know as that voted President Trump in, and most all Americans. We are over 50% that support life, that don't support choice. We've got some big things weighing ahead of us, of course, in the Supreme Court, state by state, as we look at Mississippi and Texas and some other things that'll be coming up. We need to really pray for those. But President Trump, as I said, I've known him for a long time. We started the election process by prayer in 2011. And he asked me to bring 20, 30 people together and just pray. He had to make a decision. Was he going to run? So we were praying. And then by 2014, 15, he said, Paula, I think I'm going to run by 15. He absolutely knew. And he said, you're going to be my faith director. I was thinking, and he said, I'm going to run for president. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sure you know what you're doing, but what's a caucus in Iowa? It was absolutely out of my lane and so far beyond me. But God really, I got some books and some quick crash courses and found out a lot about how politics works. I say that because there was a meeting specifically that we started doing just one-on-ones. President Trump, then candidate Trump, was always so open to being with people. And that was one thing. People said, oh, Hillary and this person just hates you because people. I'm like, why? This is President Trump. He loves people. He loves being around people. And I'll never forget that they asked him one time, there were about 40 preachers or so in this meeting, and rabbis, priests, and they said, okay, weren't you pro-choice, you're pro-life, and how did this happen? This is prior. And he began to tell the story in his life, and it made sense to so many people. Of course, I knew this, but he said how one of his closest friends was faced with just the most horrific decision he'd ever had to face, and his wife had decided to get an abortion, though the husband did not want it. And he said, I never really had to think about it as a business person. He said, but when I started thinking about it and seeing the pain that he went through, I just could not see how anyone could take the life of a child. So this is very dear and personal to him. It wasn't just about his base. It wasn't just about, it's about what's right. He really protected life, as we know, fought hard against it, defunded Planned Parenthood, Mexico City abortion, which equates to literally billions of dollars. And of course, Biden put that right back in within the first week of his administration as the good Catholic he is.